There is a smell that takes me straight back to being 6 years old. Not perfume, not flowers, just a big iron pot on a wood stove full of something that didn't have a fancy name. Just beans, a ham hock, and whatever God gave from the garden that week. And that smell meant we were going to be all right. My grandmama could feed 9 people on what most folks today would throw away without thinking twice. She didn't call it resourceful. She didn't call it creative cooking. She just called it Tuesday. And honestly, Tuesday tasted like the best thing you ever ate. I'm saving one recipe for near the end, and I need you to stay with me. It's the dish my great grandmother, Mama Odessa, made in the winter of 1933 when there was almost nothing left and 7 children to feed. What she did with a sack of great northern beans and pure determination still brings me to tears every time I think about it. So you stay right here with Gloria. We'll get there together, I promise you that. The recipes. Number 1, crackling cornbread. Cornbread in the 1930s. South wasn't just a side dish, it was the foundation that stretched everything else on the table a little further. Cracklings are the crispy golden bits left after you render down pork fat over heat. Salty, crunchy, and packed with real flavor. Nothing got wasted in those households, so those cracklings went straight into the batter. Mix coarse ground cornmeal with flour, salt, leavening, and buttermilk. Fold in those cracklings, pour it into a hot greased cast iron skillet, and bake until the top cracked and the edges pulled away golden. My grandmama said the cracklings weren't just flavor. They were protein and calories that kept working men standing in the field past noon. Every bite was doing a job, and that cornbread coming out of the oven smelled like home in a way nothing else ever could. The sound it made when you cut into it, that deep, satisfying crunch. Lord have mercy. Number 2, pot liquor, soup. Pot liquor is the liquid left in the bottom of the pot after you've cooked down a big mess of greens low and slow with a little pork. In lean times, that dark, rich, deeply flavored broth was not poured down the drain. It was supper. Families ladled it into bowls, crumbled cornbread straight into it, and that was the meal. What pot liquor contains is every vitamin and mineral that cooked out of those greens. Iron, calcium, potassium, all sitting right there. My great Aunt Lula saved pot liquor in mason jars and heated it up for sick children. She swore it cured everything short of a broken bone, and nobody in her house stayed poorly for long. The taste of it, smoky and savory and just barely bitter, wraps around you like something warm and ancient and deeply familiar, even the very first time you taste it. Number 3, fried salt pork. Salt pork, a thick slab of pork heavily cured in salt, could keep a long time without refrigeration, making it invaluable in rural homes. Families fried it simply, sliced, rinsed of some salt, laid into a hot cast iron skillet until golden and crisp on both sides. That smoky, salty smell filled the whole house and drifted right out the window. Eaten with cornbread, it was breakfast and sometimes supper. Those drippings left in the pan became gravy, became fried potatoes, became flavor for whatever vegetable was on the stove. Nothing was ever wasted. My grandfather, Papa Joe, ate fried salt pork nearly every morning of his life as a sharecropper who needed real, lasting fuel to work from sun up past sundown. Salt pork was not fancy, but it was honest, and it did exactly what needed to be done. Number 4, dried bean stew. Whether it was pintos, navy beans, black-eyed peas, or great northerns, dried beans were the backbone of Depression cooking. Cheap enough that even the poorest families kept a sack on hand. Soak them overnight, drain them in the morning, cover them fresh with water, and set them on the stove with a ham hock or salt pork, onion, and salt. Then you waited low and slow, hours of patient cooking until the liquid thickened and every bean turned creamy and deeply seasoned all the way through. Served over cornbread, a pot of beans felt like a genuine feast. The smell of beans cooking all day is something children carry in their hearts for the rest of their lives. To this day, when I put a pot of beans on, I feel my grandmother standing right behind me. That is the kind of memory that never leaves you, and I am grateful every single day that I have it. Number 5, hoe cakes. Just cornmeal, salt, and water stirred into a batter and fried in a hot greased skillet. Hoe cakes are one of the oldest foods in African American history. The name comes from cooking flat cakes on the blade of a garden hoe held over an open fire. Drop the batter by spoonfuls into cast iron, let the edges set and bubbles form, then flip until the other side turns golden and crisp. Eaten with syrup for breakfast, alongside beans for supper, or crumbled into cold milk and eaten with a spoon. My mother made hoe cakes on Sunday mornings, and no fine restaurant has ever made me feel the way a hot hoe cake with cane syrup made me feel as a child. That crispy edge and that soft, warm center. Simple as it was, it tasted like being loved. That is not a small thing. That is everything. I keep thinking about my grandmother's kitchen while I talk to you. Saturday mornings in that kitchen are something I will carry until the day I leave this earth. The wood stove was already going when I woke up because Grandmama had been up long before light. The whole house smelled like wood smoke and something good. There was always a dish towel folded neat over the handle of the stove. She never seemed rushed, even though she had every reason to be. Every so often, she'd look back at me and say, "You watching, Gloria? You better be watching." I was watching, Grandmama. I promise I was. Number 6, stewed tomatoes over biscuits. Chop your ripest summer tomatoes, put them in a pot with a little lard, salt, a pinch of sugar, and onion. Let them cook down until thick and jammy. Then pour that warm red stew over a split biscuit. Sweet and tangy and savory, the biscuit soaking up all that juice from underneath. Those biscuits were made the old way. Lard worked into flour with the fingertips, buttermilk added just until it came together, baked hot until golden and puffed. Split one open and ladle that jammy tomato stew right over the top, and you had something that looked almost fancy on the plate. Children scraped their plates clean every time. This dish taught me that luxury is not about expensive ingredients. Luxury is about care, and those grandmothers put care into everything they touched. Number 7, boiled peanuts as a meal. In the 1930s, Deep South, boiled peanuts were sometimes all there was for supper. Pull them fresh from the ground, wash them well, cover them in heavily salted water, and boil them low and slow for hours until the shells softened and the peanuts inside turned creamy and almost buttery. These tasted nothing like a dry roasted peanut, soft and rich and deeply salty all the way through. A pot of boiled peanuts with cornbread filled hungry stomachs and provided real protein and staying power. My grandmother told me about summers when that pot was what stood between her family and an empty table. She never said that with bitterness. She always said it with pride. Pride is part of the recipe too, and love, and the knowledge that you can make something good from almost nothing. Number 8, sweet potato pudding. While boil your sweet potatoes soft, peel and mash them smooth, stir in eggs, a little milk, sugar, butter, cinnamon, and nutmeg. Pour it into a greased baking dish and bake until set and the top turns golden and caramelized. The whole house fills with that warm, spiced caramel sweet smell that makes any day feel like a celebration. Sweet potato pudding was Sunday food, church supper food, the dish grandmamas were genuinely proud of. Simple ingredients but beautiful, the color of autumn leaves, tasting of warmth and home and love, and it cost almost nothing, which is the quiet miracle at the heart of everything we're talking about today. Number 9, chitterlings. Chitlins became part of African American foodways because of the history of slavery. Enslaved people were given the parts of the animal that slaveholders didn't want, and rather than go hungry, black cooks turned those parts into real, meaningful food. Cleaning chitlins took hours of careful work, but the women who did it never did it alone. They gathered together, told stories, and laughed. Once cleaned, chitlins were boiled long and slow with onions, garlic, salt, red pepper, and vinegar until tender and deeply flavored. Eating chitlins remains an act of remembrance. It says we came from something hard and made it something worth honoring. We are not ashamed of where we come from, and we never will be. That history is ours, and the food that came from it is something to be honored and kept alive. Number 10, fried green tomatoes. Salt, unripe tomato slices, dredge them through seasoned cornmeal, fry them in hot oil until the coating crisped golden and the tomato inside softened into something tangy and creamy and almost melting. The contrast between that crunchy crust and the soft tart center was extraordinary, a bite that told you someone knew exactly what they were doing. They could be a side dish or a full meal laid on cornbread, and because they used tomatoes before full ripeness, not a single thing from the garden went to waste. Children who refused vegetables ate fried green tomatoes without a word. Grandmamas knew this and used it wisely every single summer. The green tomato season was short and precious, and not a slice was ever let go to waste. Church suppers in our neighborhood were some of the finest meals I ever ate, not because any dish was fancy, but because every woman brought her absolute best. Miss Rosie brought potato salad. Sister May brought rolls so light they practically floated off the pan. Old Mrs. Crawford, who walked with a cane and didn't say much, brought a chocolate cake that made grown men close their eyes at the first bite. My grandmother always brought collard greens and cornbread, and people lined up for those greens. I stood right beside her, feeling 10 feet tall just because she was mine. Those women fed a whole community on very little, and they did it with a grace and a generosity I have spent my whole life trying to learn from. Before we go any further, do any of these dishes bring back a memory? Did your grandmother make something on this list? Go down to the comments and tell me about it. Tell me the dish. Tell me who made it. Tell me what it smelled like when it came out of the oven. I read every single comment, and your stories mean the world to me. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that right now so you don't miss a single video. All right, let's keep going because we still have 10 more beautiful dishes to talk about. Number 11, molasses bread mix. Yeast proofed in warm water with flour, salt, lard, and a generous pour of dark molasses. Knead it into a soft brown dough. Leave it to rise most of the morning. Then bake until firm outside and springy within. That bread came out a deep warm brown all the way through, and the smell, yeasty and sweetly complex, was something worth remembering. Sliced thick with a little butter, it disappeared fast in a house full of children. The molasses provided iron and minerals that many poor families weren't getting elsewhere. Those grandmothers were nourishing their people better than they probably knew. A loaf of molasses bread and some drippings on the side could carry a family through a whole hard day. That molasses sweetness gave people energy and warmth and something that felt like comfort even in the leanest of times. Number 12, collard greens with ham hock. Wash the leaves thoroughly, strip them from the tough stems, put them in a large pot with water, a ham hock, onion, salt, and pepper. Bring it to a boil, then cook low for 3 or 4 long hours. The greens cook down to almost nothing in volume but become silky and tender and deeply infused with smoky pork flavor. The color shifts from bright green to a deep olive. And that's not overcooked. That's done. That's right. My grandmother always said if your greens are still bright green, they aren't finished yet, with cornbread alongside to soak up that pot liquor. This remains one of the most nourishing meals you can put on any table, and it has been proving that for generations. My grandmother made them, her mother made them, and I make them still. Number 13, cornmeal mush. Bring salted water to a boil. Slowly pour in cornmeal while stirring constantly. Cook until thick and bubbling and serve it hot with butter melting on top and a drizzle of molasses. Warm and filling. Tasting of corn in the simplest, most comforting way. But leftover mush poured into a pan and cooled overnight sets firm. And the next morning you'd slice it and fry those slices until the outside crisped golden and the inside stayed creamy. Those fried slices were honestly better than the original, and every grandmama in the South knew it. Nothing was ever wasted in those kitchens, and leftovers had a way of becoming the best thing you ate all week. That is the wisdom of these women. Nothing in, nothing out, and somehow everything turns into something better. Number 14, neck bones and rice brown. The neck bones in a pot. Add water, onion, garlic, salt, and pepper, and let them simmer low and slow until the meat fell from the bone and the broth thickened into a rich, savory gravy. Serve it over white rice that soaks up every drop of that beautiful liquid. Eating neck bones required patience, picking carefully at those bones, pulling away small pieces slowly, and that unhurried eating meant everyone felt more satisfied than a quick meal could provide. Grandmamas understood this. Food that took time to eat stretched further and left people genuinely full. And when you finally got all that meat off those bones and tasted it in that thick pork-flavored gravy over rice, you understood why this dish has never really left our tables. Number 15, skillet fried okra. Slice the okra into rounds. Toss them in seasoned cornmeal and fry them in a single layer in hot oil until golden on both sides, crispy all around, slightly chewy in the center, tasting of corn and salt and something bright and good. Done this way, there is no sliminess whatsoever. Okra grew easily in southern heat, making it one of the most reliable vegetables through lean months. Children ate it like candy. Grandmamas always made twice as much as they thought they needed because half of it vanished before it ever reached the table. I still make fried okra this same way, and I still have the same problem, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Some things in this life are perfect exactly as they are, and fried okra is one of them. My grandmother said something to me once I have not forgotten for a single day of my life. I was about 10 years old and had left food on my plate, and she sat across from me and said quietly, "Gloria, baby, every crumb on that plate is a prayer that God answered. You understand me?" I didn't fully understand then, but I do now. Those families prayed over their food in a way that was real and specific because they knew exactly what it meant to not have enough. When the pot was full, that was grace. You did not waste grace. I try to cook with that spirit every single day, and I hope when you make any of these dishes, you feel a little piece of it too. Number 16, butter bean succotash. Cook shelled butter beans in salted water until creamy and tender. Cut corn off the cob and scrape every drop of milky liquid from it too. Cook the corn in a little butter, add the beans and a splash of their cooking liquid. Season well and let everything come together warm. Soft and creamy and sweet and savory at once. Tasting of summer and the garden and something deeply honest. Together, those two simple vegetables made something greater than either alone. Wholesome, unhurried food that reminds you what vegetables taste like when they come from somewhere that truly loved them. Every spoonful tasted like the garden was right there at the table with you, and that is a feeling worth chasing all your life. Number 17, blackberry cobbler from the wild bush. Pour wild-picked berries into a baking dish. Toss them with sugar to draw out their juice. Pour a simple batter of flour, sugar, leavening, butter, and buttermilk right over the top, and bake until the batter rises up through the berries while the berries bubble up through the batter, creating a golden crust with pools of dark glossy berry syrup showing through. The smell was pure summer sweetness served with cold milk poured over the top. There was no ice cream to be had. It was the finest dessert imaginable. Children who helped pick the berries always got the first bowl. That was the rule, and it was exactly the right one. There is no dessert in any restaurant on this earth that tastes like a bowl of wild blackberry cobbler with cold milk poured over it. Number 18. Pickled pig's feet. Simmer clean pig's feet until tender. Pack them into a crock with vinegar, water, salt, sugar, peppercorns, and bay leaves, and let them sit in that brine until the flavor went all the way through. Eaten cold with cornbread alongside, the vinegar sharp and bright, the pork rich and satisfying. Pickled pig's feet were a whole experience. Before reliable refrigeration, pickling preserved food for weeks at a time. Knowing you had a jar of these in the house meant you had something to eat. And in the 1930s, that was never something to take lightly. That jar in the crock represented foresight and love. A grandmother thinking ahead so her family would always be all right. Number 19, squirrel stew. Having someone who could hunt was the difference between meat on the table and no meat at all in the Depression-era rural South. Squirrel meat is lean and dark and mild and genuinely good when prepared with care. Cut it up like a chicken. Brown the pieces in lard. Add water, onion, potatoes, salt, and pepper, and let it simmer low and slow until the meat fell from the bone and the broth turned golden and rich. With cornbread to dunk in that broth, it was a filling meal that required almost nothing from a store. Those children grew up healthy and strong, not in spite of what they ate, because of it. A hunter in the family was not just useful, he was essential, he kept people alive, and that deserves to be remembered. Number 20, Mama Odessa's Great Northern Bean Pot. My great-grandmother's name was Odessa May Turner. She stood about 5'2" and could fill a room just by walking into it. She raised 7 children in rural Mississippi. And in the winter of 1933, things got so hard there were days when the cupboard held almost nothing. Her husband had been sick. The last harvest had been poor. 7 children needed to be fed. What Mama Odessa had was a cloth sack of dried Great Northern beans, some rationed salt pork, a few dried onions hanging from the ceiling, lard, cornmeal, and salt. That was nearly all, and from that nearly all she fed her whole family through that entire long, cold winter. She soaked the beans overnight in cold water. Come morning, she drained them, filled her biggest cast iron pot with fresh water, and added the beans, the salt pork, those dried onions split in half, and plenty of salt. She set that pot over low heat and left it. Every hour she'd check, add water if needed, give it a gentle stir. The salt pork slowly surrendered its fat and flavor into the liquid. The onions dissolved to softness. The beans drank in all that richness, hour after patient hour. By late afternoon, something had happened beyond simple cooking. The broth had thickened into something almost creamy, the outsides of the beans having broken down and given themselves to the liquid. The beans inside were completely tender and smooth all the way through. The meat from the salt pork pulled off in soft pieces that stirred right back into the pot. The smell of those beans in the deep of winter filled that whole small house. My grandmother said the smell alone made you feel taken care of before you ever sat down at the table. Mama Odessa served those beans with hoe cakes made fresh in the skillet, just cornmeal and salt and water cooked hot and fast. She'd ladle beans and broth together into each bowl, thick enough that a spoon nearly stood in it, with 2 hoe cakes on the side. 7 children, 2 adults. Everybody had enough. Everybody went to bed full and warm. She did this for months. The same patient pot of beans, whatever little piece of pork she could spare, hoe cakes alongside. And those children didn't just survive that winter. They were healthy. They went to school. They grew up to have children and grandchildren of their own, including the grandmother who carried this story all her life, and including me, standing here in this kitchen, telling it to you now. My grandmother used to say, Mama could make a bean taste like a miracle. She was right. It wasn't only the cooking, it was the love and the refusal to give up that went into that pot. When love and necessity come together like that, something happens that no recipe can fully capture. Those beans were everything she had, and she gave everything she had to make them enough. And now you know this story too. Today we travel back to the 1930s and visited 20 dishes that kept families alive through some of the hardest times this country has ever seen. Crackling cornbread and pot liquor soup, fried salt pork, and dried bean stew. Hoe cakes and stewed tomatoes over biscuits, boiled peanuts for supper, and sweet potato pudding on Sunday. Chitterlings with all their deep history and fried green tomatoes from the vine. Molasses bread and collard greens with ham hock. Cornmeal mush fried crispy the next morning, and neck bones over rice. Skillet fried okra and butter bean succotash. Blackberry cobbler from the wild bush, and pickled pig's feet from the crock. Squirrel stew through the cold hunting months, and Mama Odessa's great northern bean pot that carried a whole family through the winter of 1933. Before you go, here's something I mean with everything in me. These recipes were never just about food. They were about love that refused to quit, about mothers and grandmothers who looked at a nearly empty pantry and still saw a meal, about communities that gathered around tables and shared what little they had and made every person sitting there feel like there was plenty. The people who cooked these dishes had deep, old, hard-won knowledge passed down from the women who came before them. Because they had that knowledge, they had dignity. Because they had dignity, they survived. And because they survived, you and I are here today. Don't you ever be ashamed of where this food came from. Wear it like a crown. These women made miracles out of what they had, and the least we can do is remember them and say their names. Next time, I'm taking you to the church kitchen, and honey, the women who cooked Sunday dinner after service had a whole different level of genius going on. You think what we talked about today was something? Just you wait. Stories that will make you laugh and make you hungry in the very same breath. Come on back. Something good will be waiting. You are always welcome at my table. God bless you, sweet friend. Now go call somebody you love.